What is a recession? A significant, pervasive, and protracted decline in economic activity is referred to as a recession. One widely used definition, which some claim is the technical definition, states that a recession is one in which a nation's gross domestic product, or GDP, declined for 2 consecutive quarters. This is because recessions can typically last 6 months or more. That implies that the value of all products and services produced in a nation decreased for a continuous period of 6 months. Economists, particularly those at the National Bureau of Economic Research, define a recession as an economic contraction that starts at the peak of the last expansion and concludes at the bottom of the next downturn. The Bureau considers a variety of indicators to pinpoint the start and conclusion of recessions, typically months after the peak and trough of the business cycle. These indicators include non-farm payrolls, manufacturing, and retail sales, among others. If these economic indicators continue to deteriorate, the GDP would show a decline, indicating the end of the boom and the beginning of the recession. An improvement in these measures, which leads to an increase in GDP, marks the end of the recession and the start of the economic recovery. Recessions could last only a few months, but it could take years for the economy to recover to its pre-recession level. A country's GDP normally declines by 2% during a recession, though in very severe circumstances, that decrease might reach 5%. Declines in economic output and employment can spiral out of control, because they can signify a sudden reverse of the generally prevalent trend. For instance, the layoffs brought on by less consumer demand affected the income and spending of the recently unemployed, further weakening demand. Governments around the world have implemented counter-cyclical fiscal and monetary measures to ensure that routine recessions don't worsen and harm their long-term economic prospects. Because of the extremely unfavorable effects on a country's population. What indicators do economists look for to predict a recession before it occurs? While there is no single reliable recession predictor, an inverted yield curve has predicted each of the 10 U.S. recessions since 1955, while also setting off a few false alarms. In an inverted yield curve, the longer-term 10-year bonds have a lower yield than the shorter-term 2-year notes. A 10-year bond typically has a higher yield than a 2-year note. When bond traders predict future economic weakness and interest rate reductions, the yield curve inverts. The number of individuals engaged in the manufacturing sector is another leading indication. In the manufacturing industry, orders are frequently scheduled months in advance. A factory or business will stop employing new employees when they receive fewer orders, and they may also decide to let go of some current employees. This suggests that other areas of the economy will also slow down. What causes recessions? Some economists place the most importance on economic changes. Economic conditions that lower consumer demand for goods and services will result in a contraction of the economy. For instance, a sharp, prolonged rise in oil prices, brought on by a geopolitical crisis, or government policy, will result in an economy-wide increase in expenses. A spike in fuel prices as a result of an increase in the price of vital commodities like oil will make the cost of operating businesses that use these commodities very expensive. When the cost of doing business rise, businesses pass on the rising operating expenses to their customers, who then cut back on their consumption. This decline in consumer spending then causes the economy to contract and enter a recession. Natural disasters and weather events, such as hurricanes, floods, or major earthquakes, as well as man-made disasters such as wars or major terrorism incidents, can damage the infrastructure needed to produce and distribute important commodities like oil, as well as agricultural products. The resulting limited production forces the producers to raise prices on these vital commodities, causing severe inflation or a sudden increase in the price of basics, like food and electricity, among other things. By lowering consumers' real incomes, these can potentially cause a sudden decrease in consumer demand. Negative demand can also result from a crash, or bear market, in real estate or stocks, as families reduce their consumption expenditure significantly in response to a loss of wealth. High interest rates also have a negative impact on economic activity. In periods of prosperity, businesses and consumers borrow money with the expectation that the added cost can be paid for by the anticipated additional income from the economic growth. When the income does not grow as expected, the borrowers will have to reallocate money from other resources, resulting in less economic activity. As the economy weakens, banks are less willing to extend loans to higher-risk borrowers like small businesses. These small businesses would struggle to expand if lenders stop lending, and some would even go out of business. As the central bank, the Federal Reserve in the U.S., lowers its benchmark rate to assist the economy, the government's budget deficit grows. As a result of declining tax collections and higher spending on social programs, like unemployment insurance. Because more people will need government assistance, and more become eligible for the benefits. However, these policies designed to boost spending during difficult times need to be reversed during economic expansion. Policymakers will need to prevent consumers and businesses from depending too much on low or no interest loans, government stimulus, or free money to boost spending, to prevent a high inflationary environment that is not sustainable for healthy economic growth. For more videos on the economy and business news, subscribe to this channel.